Hello everyone, today we're going to be continuing by creating our tests for our post lists component. So if we come over here, we have that post list file that we created earlier. Now we just want to actually do some coverage for it. To do the coverage, we're once again going to be adding some imports at the start, but the main one that we want to add is going to be our post list, F11, and we're probably just going to want to import the memory router to get started so that we don't have to deal with that. Now, because the post list is going to be doing that GET request right here in our async load posts, we might as well go ahead and, mock up our constants file again, just like we did in, I think, 2 videos ago, maybe part 9. That's just going to allow us to use this API URL so we don't get that error. We can then go ahead and describe this test. So I'll say this is the test for the post list component, and we can go ahead and close that. To get started here, we're going to want to say, all right, let's do a test to render the list of components, just like that. And then in here, what we want to do is maybe have a test that says, let's expect, post 1 to be in the document. And then if you really want to, you can also expect a second post. That is going to require us to create some mocked post data. So let's go ahead and let's do that inside of this describe. We can just create some mock posts. We'll just give it an ID of 1 with a title of post 1. You can even give it a body if you want. A body of, I don't know, hello world, something like that. And then we can do the same thing right here, or we give this one a body of hello world as well. That's ultimately up to however you want to do this. But okay, we can expect both of these, but right now we're not going to get both of these, right? So we're going to have to actually check where these are. So let's start by doing our render call, which means we're going to have to include this render. So let's come up here and at the start, let's import render, just like this. And then let's do this from the @testing library. That should be good. Now let's come into here in our render function and we can say, all right, let's render the component. So this is going to be the posts list component. And let's once again give this a wrapper for the memory router, just like that. We can go ahead and close this. So now we render the component and then we're expecting the screen to have this text. But of course, in order to do that, like if we were to run this right now, I don't know if this will actually work out of the box. So let's go ahead and let's do an npm run test. Actually, we can do an npm run coverage, right? Because we set that up previously. So let's do npm run coverage in our post list right here. We can see screen get by text is not a function, which means we do need to include the get by text. So let's go ahead and let's do that as well. And screen is going to be up here in the render. So let's, after the render, let's do screen, save that, and then we can run this test again just to see what comes back. So our post list should run. There we go. We can see it, testing library, unable to find an element with text post 1. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to await for that text because it's not going to appear there right away. The other thing that we can take a look at right here is our coverage. So we can see right now our services only has a 4.54% coverage, where it's missing coverage for lines 5 through 62, which is effectively the entire post service, right? For our post list, just by having this one test, we kind of have some stuff being covered, but we're still having a couple gaps right here. So we're like only got like 57 or 58% line coverage, for example. So as we go through and we do this, we should expect these numbers to hopefully improve a bit. But let's go ahead and let's deal with this get by text. To deal with this, we can come in here after the render and we can just real quick say, all right, you know what? I want to await, and then we can do something like a screen.findBy text. And then the other thing we're going to want to do here, because we're trying to wait for the getting of these text components or these posts, whatever you want to call them, we're also going to have to set up some mocked stuff again. So we can come in here and we can say, all right, at our test level right here, or at our describe level, after we do the mock test, we want to do a before each so that we can do some setup when we go to run our test. So before each test, we want to do something where we say like posts service.fetch all posts .mock resolved value. And we'll take a look at what this means in a second. And then we'll pass in the mock posts. For this post service, we have to actually create this. And to do that, we can actually come in here and we can say at the top, let's do something like import star as posts service from .. /services /post service. And then in here, we can do a just.mock and we can do a mock for this post service. We can do another arrow function. And then in here, what we can do, oops, let me change this. This should actually be a It's going to be a parentheses and then a brace, something like that. And here we can do a fetch all posts for a JSON function, or a just function, sorry. And then we can just go ahead and we can save that. Now, if we come down here, I do need to close this properly, and that should allow us to test this. And now instead of running it in our console over here, let me just go ahead and let me click run on this specific component. And that should hopefully run this component for us. And we can see one test has passed. So if we come over to our console now and we run npm run coverage, we can then see in here, we now have 57% coverage and our tests are all passing. So that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and let's try to add another test here following a similar structure. We have the test for rendering like all of the posts. We do have the delete button. So let's go ahead and let's try and do that. Come down here, do a test. It deletes a post when the delete button is pressed, right? Then we can say, let's once again render the post list with the wrapper for the memory router. We can then go ahead and we can await for our get by text for a post one. And then we can do something like a fire event.click. And then for this, we can do a screen.get by text. And then we want to get post one again. And in this case, you might want to do something like const post text is equal to, and then we'll just say post one so that we don't have to repeatedly type this, because that can result in, you know, your test failing just because you're doing something wrong. And actually this right here shouldn't be screen.get by text. That was dumb on my part. It should be screen.get all by text. And then we want to get the delete button. And then we want to do a 0 in here because this is going to get all of the delete buttons. And of course, if we have like 5 posts, we're going to have 5 delete buttons. So we're getting the first delete button, which is for, you know, post 1, for example. Then we can do something like an await wait for, where we expect the post service dot, let's do delete post to have been called. And we don't have to say how many times. So to have been called like this. And what we're effectively doing here is we're saying after we click the delete button, we want to wait for, and then we want to expect that the delete button is calling a mocked post services delete post. So up here where we have this post service fetch all posts, we're also going to need to say in our before each that we want to have the post service.delete post mock resolve values. We don't have to pass anything in here, but that does mean that up here after the fetch all posts, we want to have a delete post service as well. Because again, we're trying to like separate what the index page's responsibilities are from the service. So when we have like the delete post being pressed, we don't need to test that the post is deleted in the post index page. That's something we would want to test like in the post service to make sure it's doing what it should. And then on the Rails backend, we want to make sure that when a request comes in to delete a post, that it's actually deleted. And then you could have like an overall test where you just make sure that all of these things stitched together work properly as well. But you don't want to just like have every test related to every component because that's just going to be a pain in the butt, right? Like you're going to have your index page test failing because your API post service is failing because you forgot to start your Rails server. And then you're looking at your index post test and you're like, why is this failing? It doesn't make any sense. Meanwhile, with this structure, your index post service page thing is still going to pass. It's only going to be like your post service that's failing. And you're probably going to notice, oh, all of my API tests are failing. So that means it's probably an API issue. I forgot to start my Rails server. Oops. As opposed to thinking like something's wrong with your index page, for example. But okay, we have that. We can wait for the delete post service to have been called. And then after we do that, we can then say, let's expect, it's going to be screen query by text for the post text not to be in the document because we've deleted the post. So we're expecting post 1 to no longer be in the document. And then if we go ahead and we click run on this, we can see if this works. And then we can see that 1 passed, 1 total, 1 skipped, etc. So this this test for deleting a post when delete button is clicked seems to have been successful. So if we come up here, we can actually run this entire suite for the post list component now. We can see 2 tests passed out of 2 total. So that's pretty good. So we're now testing if we can delete a post and if we can return all of them. Let's go ahead and let's run our code coverage again to see if we're higher than 57% now. So if we hit F11, we can see that we are at a 84.21%. Let me run this one more time so that things line up better when we're full screen. We're at 84.21% of line coverage. We're just missing lines 18 and 19 as well as line 30. So let's go ahead and let's do those tests for 18 and 19. If we come over to our post list, you can roughly see that 18 and 19 are these errors for our loading posts, and 30 is our error for the delete post handler. So we have to deal with both of these errors. So in our post list, we can full screen this again. We'll come down here, we'll write another test. We'll do the first one for setting the error and making sure that loading is set to false when fetching posts fails. So we make this an async test. We can then set the error message we're expecting, which is going to be an error occurred. If we come over to the post list, I don't know if we actually have anything in here. So what we probably want to do is we want to add that error. So like maybe if we get to this point where we set these errors, let's just go ahead and let's console log out the error with a message like this. And we do have one down here already for our delete post handler. So we want to test for this message in particular, right? So let me go ahead and copy this, come back over to our test. And then for our error in our post list, we can just do a check where ultimately we're checking for something like this, where E is going to be an error occurred, right? Something like that. So we have our error here. Let me go ahead and close this. After our error, we then want to do a post service dot fetch all posts mock rejected value with the error. So again, in our fetch all posts service right here, we have the mock resolved value with the mock post, but instead we're mocking a rejected value. And then we can go ahead and we can render the post list with our wrapper memory stuff again. And then we can do an await wait for. And then in here, what we can do after the await for is, let me do this. We can go ahead and do something like this. We can say, instead of doing this screen.getByText, I want to do a expect console.error to have been called with, and then it's going to be that string, which we should still have right here. So let me do this actually. Failed to fetch posts, and then we can do comma with our error right there. And now there is a better way to do this as opposed to using the console error. So we'll take a look at that. But let me go ahead and click run on this. Let me move this up a bit so we can see more. We can see right here, console.error is going to throw an error because, failed to fetch all posts, an error occurred. So how do we fix this? Well, fixing this is going to require us to come up top here, and we have our mocks for our constants. We can actually set something to mock the console error by just doing global.console.error is equal to a just function. And now if we come down here and we run this again and we move this up, we'll be able to see that we now have this test passing because we're mocking the console error and we're telling it what it's expecting to have. It's going to have that error that we are passing it in. So that's going to get logged out to the console, if you will. Now there is a better way to do this, which we'll cover in another component, but effectively what you can do instead is you can say spy on the console instead of mocking it. So maybe we'll do this as like a to-do message, right? So that's another option. I just want to cover this one first so that you can get, better hang of, mocking things if you need to, if you can't find a better way to do it. And then we'll take a look at spying on this in particular. But if we now run our coverage one more time, we'll be able to see that our coverage should now say something like 95%, where the only line we're missing is line 31. So let's take a look at line 31 in our post list, and that's still going to be this console.error failed to delete post. So let's go ahead and let's do that one real quick to call it a day. And it's going to look very similar to what we just did. So we'll come down here, we'll say, all right, I want to log the error when a post is failed to be deleted. And then once again, we're going to have to do something where we say mock or fetch all posts, mock resolved value with our post results. So we're actually getting the posts, and then we're going to say, here's your delete error, deletion failed. We can then do post service.delete post for mock rejected value. So we're passing in the rejected value again. Then we can do a render for the post list. Let's go ahead and let's break that a bit. And then we can say, let's wait for the get by text again for post 1. Then we can do our deletion click again, but this time because we are mocking a rejected value with our error for the deletion actually is, right here, mock rejected for the deletion. When we try to delete because we're mocking a rejected value, that's actually going to be our error instead. So it makes it really easy to set up these fail states because instead of having to write your logic so that you can actually get into the deletion fail state, for example, you can just say mock something that deletes, that's going to be a rejected value or an error state, and then it'll just take you there. And you can say, all right, well, I've done that. I've now clicked the delete button. So what am I doing? Well, that's right. I'm going to be waiting or await for our expect console.error again to have been called. And this time it's going to be failed to delete post, which matches this text right here. Failed to delete post, although there is a space right here. And then our delete error. So let's go ahead and let's do this. Let's click run on this test. And we should have enough of vertical real estate here. So we'll do this, and we can see right here, we run into an error, and this is exactly because of that space. So you're going to want to make sure that your tests kind of match up there, whichever way you want this to work. So maybe if we're doing a space here for failed to delete post, we're going to also want to do one up here for failed to fetch post, which means we're going to have to come into our actual component here and add this space into our load post console.error, and make sure that our console.error in our delete post handler is also working. So if we do all of that, and then we can come in here and we can run this test again, and we should hopefully see that this test passes, which it does. And then we can come over to our terminal one final time. We can run npm run coverage, just like this. And now we can see we have a perfect 100% code coverage, which means our middle managers are going to be happy with us. So we can go ahead and we can grab this. We can do a get status to see what we changed. We changed our post list and our test, which makes sense because we had to modify that text. So that's good. Let's do a get add dot, get commit -m, implement posts list tests, and then we can do a git push. We can come over to our GitHub repo. We can go over to code, and we can say, all right, compare and pull request. And we're going to do something here that's a little weird, but because we don't have anything here that tells us what our code coverage is right now, no like continuous integration, just say 100% code coverage. And then we'll just include a screenshot as like proof of our code coverage, because there's nothing in the repo that'll run that'll tell us what our code coverage is right now, I believe. So we can see here, okay, cool. They implemented the tests. They got 100% code coverage for the post list component. That seems cool. Let's go ahead and let's merge this pull request. And that's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we'll hopefully cover maybe the post details page is what we'll cover. But until now, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I will see you in the next one.